Now, Wikipedia tell me that the leitmotif of CBC has been its role in maintaining Canadian identity. That's what they say. This was easier when we thought geography defined our identity. In this era, national identity is a set of shared cultural references. What differentiates Canadians from Puerto Ricans or the English from the Scots is no longer geography, but cultural references. Now, of course, that was always true. But now, national identity is a shared cultural reference stored in binary code available anywhere. True, this set of shared references may have a cluster bias to a specific geographic node, like Blue Jay fans in Toronto, but if you live in a house in Ulaanbaatar, and courtesy of broadband and home delivery, you have never ventured out of the house. You have only consumed Last Mountain Saskatoon berry jam, Canadian Club, maple syrup. Your only media is Canadian publications, Canadian radio, Canadian TV and sports. You absorb Canadian political debate when it's not prorogued, and endless listening to Brian Adams, K.D. Lang and Leonard Cohen, who induces a slight melancholia that can only be cured by visiting newfeedjokes.net. Are you a Canadian or a Mongolian? A Canadian, of course. Sure, there is more to being Canadian than just those references, but you can have as many Canadian references as you like anywhere. That's why the net is so threatening to those poor Mongolian parents in Ulaanbaatar who are moaning, "Oh, Changgis, you can't build a yurt, ride a horse and recite the secret history of our people. All we hear is Alexander Bilodeau, and could we send a yak to Mael Ricca? And what about those senators fighting with sticks for Mr. Stanley's beaker?" Anyone with even a cursory knowledge of either Quebec or Northern Ireland or the Basques knows you brush with identity at your peril. Underneath the calm reason of our media debate is this identity issue, seeping, odorless, like radon accumulating in a basement. I mentioned earlier how an increased supply of media has fragmented audiences for traditional broadcasters. Likewise, the net, the web, means a horde of references that fragment notions of national identity. That's fine if you believe travel, albeit broadband, broadens the mind. Not so fine if you believe that it slutifies your society and mocks your deity. Here lies fear, as we all have borders, boundaries, and barriers we wish to preserve. Now, where once allegiance to territory meant allegiance to community, we are now caught in a gap where allegiance to territory and allegiance to community are increasingly different things. Al-Qaeda is an example of those who use the web to work for a triumph of community over loyalty to their respective states. This is not new. Major religions have always been about a community that transcends territoriality, and history is full of martyrs whose allegiance to religious community trumped their allegiance to state. It is in these issues of allegiance to cultural references that there is a reason to be afraid, because here lie the identity wars of the net world. Luther totally disrupted Europe with a community over geography concept, armed with merely a printing press. What could be wrought now? What happens when an irresistible, homogeneous force meets an immovable cultural reference? Now, in this era, country-first politics get hazy. For example, you may have guessed this by now, I have a very good Canadian friend. We have been corresponding for over 45 years, and he argues passionately for preserving Canadian jobs for Canadians. But in a world where community trumps geography, does this include my cultural Canadian in Ulaanbaatar? In the UK, public broadcasting policy is concerned with historic geography issues and is yet to focus on this crucial trend towards community. So if national identity is important to you, you may well argue for more state-funded media as a cultural reference generator to reinforce notions of identity. More money for public service content and for broadband distribution systems to carry it. At the very least, you may realize that in this geography-free world, the title UK Digital Economy Bill is a tad oxymoronic, as every act of digitization erodes borders and fragments notions of what it is to be British. So to quote the website, the Digital Economy Bill sets out government plans to ensure the UK is at the leading edge of the global digital economy. Very different from here. Now, you don't need me to fly here to tell you to go to the website. My role is to provide you with the most important philosophical tool since Plato invented the cave. It's called the dudometer or the dudometer, whichever you prefer. And if the word dude sticks, if it bonds to a sentence like superglued Lego, then you know you have entered a fifth dimension where language no longer conveys meaning, an area which we call the banality zone. Dude does not stick to the artfully wrought. To suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, dude does not resonate. I could drink a case of you, dude, and dude quails before that art. The problem with the internet is that it's so huge that descriptors wither and language slithers into banality. See what happens when you add dude to any well-known phrase or saying about the internet. Whoa, man, it's the internet. It's like the biggest thing since the printing press, dude. Fits fine, sticks nicely. The dudometer is just a test for the blindingly obvious. It's the consumer, dude. Works well. And shows where thought has shriveled before the enormity of the subject. The net, it's too big, dude. Absolutely. And this is why dude sticks nicely to many government exhortations about the net, i.e. the UK's new bill with its gotta be at the leading edge of the global digital economy, dude. I hope some of you got a room to stay in, because I don't think I'm not going to be allowed back in the UK after this. The UK bill came from the Digital Britain report that said, you know, we have to upgrade and modernize our digital networks. It had a vision of guaranteeing a universal 2 megabits for all, knowing that if we could manage that for everybody, most speeds would be higher. This would be paid for by a household telephone line tax, but this doesn't seem to have made it in the bill. We're waiting to see what happens to that thought. The bill then goes on to call for a dynamic investment climate for UK digital content. This so deserves a dude. This is the perennial, how do we create a Silicon Valley in the UK? That's hard. Silicon Valley wasn't created by command, it grew.